Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Sports. It looks like Rassie Erasmus might have finally found his long-term number 6 replacement for Siya Kolisi in the form of Paul de Villiers, who is reportedly set to receive an invitation to the first Springbok alignment camp of the year, which will take place in March. This season, Paul de Villiers has been earning Man of the Match awards like it's going out of fashion and has been one of the, if not the standout performer for the Stormers in a season where, by the last few weeks, they have been an untouchable, to be honest. And the former junior Springbok captain is just making waves in a position where Siya Kolisi has been a mainstay in the Boks team for a number of years. And whilst a couple of players have come in and out, we're yet to really see that long-term successor. But we might have exactly that in Paul de Villiers. And if the reports are to be believed, it looks like he could be not only part of the alignment camp in the next few months, but also potentially making a Springbok debut sometime this year. Before we get into it, please do smash a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. So it is a article coming out from the report, which basically said that there are a number of players who are set to be included in the Springbok alignment camp, which will take place in March. Obviously, we've got an interesting couple of weeks coming up with the Six Nations starting this week, Thursday, which, by the way, we will be covering. And with that, basically, it's, there's a couple of URC catch-up games almost for the South African franchises, but there are also weekends with no rugby. And as a result, it's kind of the perfect time for Springbok alignment camps, because obviously all your 4 South African franchise teams will not be involved over the weekends, and even your South African players based overseas, there'll also be weekends when they're not involved and they could attend a virtual alignment camp, which is what we have seen in the past with Japanese-based players, for example, your Irish-based players, English-based players, and the likes of that. So it's going to be quite an exciting sort of few weeks coming, given the fact that we'll start to get an idea of what the Springbok squad for the year is potentially going to look like, which sort of players are going to be involved, and maybe sometimes more importantly, which players aren't involved. Now, Paul de Villiers has, I think got 4 or 5 Man of the Match awards this year, and has basically apparently skipped to the front of the queue. There are other players who, in their current form, you kind of just can't really ignore, such as a Jean-Ray Rudolph, who's at 31 years old, and some people would say, oh, well, 31 years old, is he going to make a Boks call-up, for example? But you look at like the Dion Fourie example, and I just think that, Jean-Ray Rudolph has just been brilliant for the Bulls. And he's always played with a maturity and a reliability. And, I think sometimes even better than some of your sort of top players out there in terms of consistently producing a sort of 7, 8 out of 10 most games, and this season he's taken a step up. Other flankers, for example, who apparently are in the mix are potentially Renzo du Plessis, who's also already received a Boks call-up, has had some moments for the Lions, hasn't been able to maybe get as many games as possible as he liked in the last year. Injury issues have not helped him either, and it's going to be interesting to sort of see some of the other players and the fringe players that might get involved. For example, the Hendrickson brothers, who a year ago basically fell out of the Boks setup and just they fell out of form, for example. I think it was probably more worryingly Jaden Hendrickson, when you think he's a World Cup winner, but just couldn't get himself back into a Boks camp. And we kind of thought we had our scrum halves, basically our long-term scrum half futures sorted between, Grant Williams, a Morne van den Berg, a Jaden Hendrickson. That was the next generation to come through, and we had plenty of options. Jaden Hendrickson kind of then just fell out of form. But however, we have seen, especially over the weekend, both Hendrickson brothers putting in very big shifts in a very important win from the Sharks against the Stormers. They actually both look like they got a bit of a new lease on life under JP Peterson, which really bodes well for the Boks. At the end of the day, even if they're not making final sort of squads, to see them playing well and knowing that they are in form should we need them is a huge boost for Rassie Erasmus and his coaching staff, because they both are international quality when they're playing at the top of the game. The biggest issue is they haven't been playing at that sort of form over the last few months. But you talk about form being temporary, class being permanent, and I think both those two have the potential to be world class if they can really sort of develop their game. Potentially other youngsters that apparently have been mentioned are the likes of Isetu Inumbelele, the young hooker at Bulls. We've obviously seen Cheswell Jooste, Hashim Pete, and Bartlett Lekani in Springbok alignment camp last year. I don't think we'll see necessarily Cheswell Jooste and a Hashim Pete, given the lack of game time they've had. I do think, however, Bartlett Lekani's arrived at Lions and he's hit the ground running. Was really good. Obviously made Man of the Match in his debut. Was one of the few good players for the Lions over the weekend up against the Bulls. And if he keeps producing these kind of performances, it'll be hard pressed not to start getting into that Springbok system sooner rather than later. Even if, again, if he doesn't necessarily play, get him aligned, get him into that sort of framework, get him into the structures, and he understands what he needs to produce and kind of what he needs to focus on. Find out where his game is lacking almost. It's kind of sometimes maybe what's really important in these alignment camps is you kind of go and they'll go and say, cool, this part of your game is really good. However, you're not going to play for the Boks regularly until you develop this aspect of the game, whether it's your defense, your breakdown, your positioning, your work rate, your awareness, for example, even sometimes your conditioning. But that's what these alignment camps are about. It's about getting to know the Springbok structures, understand the standards, for example, and get individual feedback from the Springbok coaches to basically saying, this is what we're looking for. And if you can go out and give us this and do these sort of different things at a consistent level, that is how you find yourself in final Springbok squads. That is how you find yourself on a Springbok bench or in a starting lineup, for example. So, I mean, I do think these alignment camps have been the one thing that Siya Kolisi has brought in, and I think he's really changed the game with them, because there's no more kind of uncertainty about where you kind of stand. If you're not part of these alignment camps, you're not on the radar, really. And, you've got to get yourself into those alignment camps. Once you're in the alignment camps, you kind of get told where you are with regards to within the kind of the squad, whether you're a fringe player, whether you're inverted commas a project player, where you're kind of more of a reserve player, you're kind of an in case of emergency type player, which I think those are the kind of roles that Kanya Ams, Marcus Wilma Pimpies, Trevor Nyakani, I think they're moving into those kind of roles where, in a World Cup situation, if there's an injury late in the tournament, you need to draft someone and you can just do a job as you need. You've got those options. And that's very different, for example, role to somebody like a Bart at Tlhakane who, will be brought in and they'll basically be saying, you are one for the future. This is what you got to work on to get yourself back here. And I think that's where Rassie Erasmus has been so clever, in that he's brought in a very large group of players, which really covers a lot of different roles, and basically said, this is where you're at, this is what you're at, this is where you need to improve, this is what your role is. And no one is sort of left on the fringes wondering where they are. They are very transparent with their players. And I generally do think that's been a massive, massive hallmark in Rassie Erasmus' success, is the communication with players, the transparency and understanding exactly where everybody sort of fits in. So it'll be interesting to sort of see what happens in that first alignment camp. I think that Paul de Villiers has to be in. I really do. I think that he is a player who screams world class. He's got the pedigree. He's got physicality. He's got the sort of the big game moments. And, we have been desperate to find a long-term success for Siya Kolisi. And he does look like that. Maybe not quite the traditional number sort of 6 role that Rassie has often sort of gone with. When you think of a Marco starting at 6, you think of a Paul de Villiers now starting at 6. I don't think he's necessary. I mean, he's far more your Francois Lowe type player, Kwaka Smith even coming off the bench, impact player. I think that's probably where he would fit in right now. But obviously can develop his game to add more to it, to be able to fulfill the kind of role that Rassie Erasmus needs in the number 6 jersey. So what do you think? Let me know down in the comments below. Who would you like to see in that alignment camp? What are your thoughts on Paul de Villiers? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve. I'll chat to you soon.